desk. Hello, this is Storyteller Minch with some more The Night Walker. Sometimes you find death in a dream, and at times when we even journey to the realms beyond death. Do your dreams foretell the future? Mrs. Trent! The young bright voice sounded worried. It came from far away. Mrs. Trent, wake up! Irene opened her eyes. Joyce's blonde, worried face hung above her like a lovely balloon. The girl's face broke with relief. She shook her head. Gee, you gave me a scare. It was like you were dead. Irene shook herself fully awake and sat up. She stared at the window. Golden daylight shone through the glass. It was a still daytime, or she arched her back, feeling the tightness of the clothes she had fallen asleep in. Just another dream, after all. Are you all right? Joyce asked again. Irene sighed, forming a half-apologetic smile. Was I talking in my sleep? Joyce looked puzzled by the question. No, you must have seemed a little restless. I've been looking in on you all morning. All morning? Sudden alarm chilled her. What time is it? 11 o'clock. She turned to the travel clock on the vanity, confirming the statement. Irene rose quickly, straightening her clothes. You must have been very tired, Joyce offered. You should have called me. What about appointments? It's all right. The girl was so damn cheery. I took them all for you. Thank you. Joyce thrust her hands into her uniform pockets and headed for the curtained entrance. Then she checked herself. I almost forgot. What did you almost forget? There was a phone call for you. A Mr. Barry Moreland? What did he want? He said he'd tell you himself tonight. He's picking you up here at 6 o'clock. Irene paused in her primping before the mirror on the vanity. Then she shrugged. Joyce waved a hand and left. Barry Moreland. Coincidence. What was there that was so similar about Barry Moreland and the handsome devil in her dream? Arlene Trent didn't know for sure, but she meant to find out. Did it mean she was subconsciously in love with the lawyer and wouldn't admit it to herself, only to have her night self tell her the truth in the symbolic terms of passionate dream? Freud. Phooey. Irene Trent went back to combing her hair. The smiling waiter approached them, holding the long skewer away from himself. The shish kebabs, delicious morsels of meat, fastened to the rod, blazed brightly with flame. The waiter's red jacket matched perfectly. Irene sipped her martini and stared across the rim of the glass at Barry Moreland. The lawyer was sophisticated as she expected him to be. He knew all the right restaurants and nightclubs. He had no trouble in arranging an excellent table for them in the fashionable eatery. He looked fine too. A two-button Continental Petrocelli, soberly blue to match his eyes, made him very attractive dinner companion. Relaxed? He asked her softly. She lowered a drink, nodding. He liked the way she was dressed, too. She could tell he did by the male approval showing in the blue eyes. She wore a strapless midnight black gown with only white corsage to mitigate the darkness of the gown. That's the secret of my success with women. Barry laughed. Sometimes they get so relaxed around me they fall asleep. She laughed, too. Barry, tell me something. Anything, he said gallantly. Why haven't you ever married? Who says I'm not? Are you? He refused to lose his smile. That's a very leading question. Stop playing, lawyer. Just answer the question. You're perfectly safe with me. He looked straight into her eyes. I wonder. And what do you mean by that? His eyes were warm. You're a very desirable woman and a very rich one, whose at present time is quite vulnerable. He took her hand in his. She turned her palm up for him, a bemused smile working at her mouth corners. He studied it in mock seriousness. Well, there is a man in your life, tall, about 6 feet, black hair, blue eyes, unmarried, who is very attracted to you. What else do you see? I should think that was enough. She took her hand back. I suppose I told you that you have a rival. She frowned. Who? Another man. He wet his lip. That means. Yes, she nodded quickly. You might as well know. I've seen him again. Who? Where? He repeated. Last night, she said. He came to the shop. I was asleep. She almost closed her eyes, then remembered the sensation was so real. I saw him. I touched him. He spoke to me. He took me in his arms. What are you talking about? Barry pleaded. She sighed. You seemed ready enough to believe I had a lover when Howard accused me, but you said yourself it was only a dream. He protested. The fun had gone out of their dinner date. Barry, I just don't know. It seems so real to me when he comes. I see him, touch him, we kiss. Irene, he said, almost coldly, you're not making sense. I think it's time you talk this thing over with a doctor. Let me make an appointment for you. You really need to see a psyche. She glanced at him, anger flaring in her eyes. He stopped talking when he realized the implication of a suggestion. Are you trying to tell me I'm crazy? Irene, is that what you think? Is it, Barry? No. He shook his head, trying to recover lost ground. Irene, listen to me. She had risen from her chair. I heard enough. Wait, Barry said urgently, half rising to stop her. Irene had whirled, but only to find the waiter in his sleep. Oh, sorry. Skipped the extra page here when I turned. Okay. Irene had whirled, but only to find the waiter bearing down on her with 2 flaming skewers of shish kebab. The roar and cracker of the flame and the closeness of the blaze made her shrink back in terror. The waiter bowed, smiled apologetically, and went around her, heading for another table. Irene stood where she was, staring in shocked fascination at the flaming skewers, her eyes clouded over. Barry moved to her, taking her arm gently, trying to make her sit down again. Please, Barry said. It's all right. The fire, she murmured in a daze. It was so. He stared at her, an ugly suspicion showing in his own eyes. There was something peculiar about her actions. It could only mean a hidden guilt, or at the very least a well-kept secret that was striving for the daylight and sunshine. Irene, he asked softly, why are you so afraid of fire? I don't know, she whimpered faintly. Is it because of Howard? I don't know. He turned her body to face him slowly. Irene, tell me the truth. There was a lifetime of legal experience in that beat of time, which preceded his next question. Did you kill your husband? He never expected what she did next. He saw the white-hot rage fill her lovely face, saw the tears brimming in her eyes. He didn't even try to get out of the way. Her right hand, palm open, flicked like a whip across his cheek. She turned and rushed from the table, her shoulders heaving with sobs. Barely Moreland stared after her, oblivious of the staring diners sitting about him, witnesses to their altercation, each of whom would have their own diverse and contrasting opinion, and they would all be wrong, of course. But what about him? Was he right in even suggesting that Irene Trent might be a murderess? He sat down and reached for his drink. Pretty stupid move for a smart lawyer, making implications without any tangible proof. Irene Trent waited for the dream that night. She knew he would come. She closed herself off in the tiny room, locking the door. She was tired and defeated. The dinner with Barry Moreland was an unpleasant memory which she forced into her mind. She slipped between the sheets of the comfortable daybed, yawned sleepily, and turned off the bed lamp. To hell with everything. Let it come. Let it be. She was all alone in the world anyway. The room lay quietly about her. She shut her eyes and surrendered to a weariness of body and soul. The low ticking of the travel clock sounded eerily in the darkness. Soon she was breathing regularly and sleep had claimed her once again. In sleep all things fled, after all was said and done. Time stole away with the gathering darkness. Wake up, Irene Trent stirred. Wake up, my darling. She opened her eyes. The dream stood at the foot of her bed, tall, broad, masculine, a shadowy silhouette. Hello, darling. She sat up, fully awake now, staring. The dream had moved to the night table, holding aloft the travel clock. It gleamed like a star. Better hurry, it's past 9. She stared at the clock in his hand. She parted black angles, showed 9:20. She blinked in disbelief. Easier to believe in the dream than in the time. But it was after 10 when I went to bed. She gasped. The dream laughed, a low chuckle. He set the clock on the table. When I'm with you, time stands still. He had picked up her coat from the back of the chair when he had flung where she had flung it in anger with Barry Moreland. The dream held it out to her, invitingly. Here's a coat. Put your shoes on, darling. Dumbly unable to resist, she slid out from under the bed covers. What are you talking about? You'll see. He waited patiently with the coat extended. He smiled persuasively, a handsome smile. Irene moved to him, turning slowly, allowing him to help her into the thing. Come along, the dream said. The champagne is waiting. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. Champagne? Of course, darling. This is our night. He bent toward her puzzled face and kissed her. Warm flesh and blood lips made her flesh tingle. Her look of bewilderment faded as she lost herself once again in the magic of his embrace. The room spun happily, pleasurably, with a mad excitement all its very own. When did they leave the room back at the beauty shop and decide to go for a midnight drive? Irene didn't know. All she knew and cared about was that the dream was strong. His powerful arms and hands could carry her anywhere. The dark night was a sea of wonder and skyrocketing thrills. The dream was driving. A night wind whipped his tie, fluttered it about his handsome, clean-cut profile. Irene huddled next to him, her body curled close to the roughness of his suit. Soft music floated from the car radio. The lights of the dashboard were eerie, ghostly, but not all frightening. The city streets were void of blackness, broken only occasionally by the flash of a street lamp and a burst of neon. Irene was smiling in spite of her confusion. The dream was smiling too. She stirred. I wish you'd tell me where we're going. I'll do better than that. I'll show you. The world, he spun the wheel. The word to the word, he spun the wheel. The car angled on in toward the curb. He halted with rhythmical yet silent throb. Here we are, the dream said, his piercing eyes focused on the point past her shoulder. Irene followed his gaze. A huge apartment house loomed before her. Remote, unattached, the entry was dark. Squares of light windowed faced her. Where are we? Jim's face was affectionate, almost paternal. Can't you guess, darling? It's our home. Home? The word had warmth, possessiveness, belonging. Irene felt strange, wonderful glow of inevitability as she let the dream take her into their private world, further and further. There was, she saw first, a well-stocked refrigerator. This yielded 2 frosted champagne glasses. There were deep-cushioned chairs, an attractive lounge, a coffee table, and an elaborate candelabra to light the whole atmosphere up and bring it alive with extra meaning. Irene watched in a daze from the long sofa, taking in the nice furniture, the long low drapes and the maze of colorful yet odd oil paintings dominating the walls. The decor of the place was very modern, a far cry from the period prison Howard Trent has asked her to live in. This was good, this was nice, this was new. How fitting that the dream was able to complete an antithesis of Howard. He was no blind man pattering about with a cane and a cruel face. No, he was a handsome, smiling man with a soft voice and an even gentler touch. She couldn't take her eyes off the dream. He was at the coffee table, masterfully exercising the quart from the long-necked bottle of the champagne. The veins and tendons in his powerful fingers sprang into view. The cork made a popping explosion as it flew off. The dream caught it deftly before it hit the floor. He handed her a bubbling glass of champagne, holding one for himself. She studied the tiny ripples and lifted the drink to her lips. Wait, the dream commanded. She hesitated, glass still poised. She had walked to the candelabra at the far end of the coffee table. He had produced a cigarette lighter, a silver one, from his pocket and flicked it on. Irene sank back into the sofa. What are you doing? She moaned, lighting the candles. Please don't. He didn't take her seriously. He extended the lighter flame to the tip of the candles. But champagne and candlelight always go together, my darling. No! She had set the champagne glass down violently. Miraculously, it didn't break, sprang to her feet, eyes wide with fear. She stared directly at the dream. He was definitely amused. He flicked the lighter shut with a flick and then was And then his slight smile faded. A look of puzzled concern came over his face. Irene put her face in her hands. "I'm sorry, It's all right," he said, coming around the coffee table to take her in his arms. "Afraid of fire?" She looked up quickly at that, and she shrugged. "Let's not talk about it now." He tightened his embrace. "All that matters is that we're together." She bit her lip. "If only I could be sure." "Sure of what?" She tried to smile at him. "I don't know what to believe." "Darling," he laughed. He laughed very easily. He gazed at her hungrily, his eyes wanting her. He kissed her full on the lips and drew back. "Did you believe that?" "Oh, yes, yes." The dream nodded. Time for champagne then, and no more doubts, no more suspicions. He lifted the 2 glasses again. Irene took hers quickly. "What are we celebrating?" she asked almost coyly. "It's a surprise." She hesitated again, surprised they were responsible for too much of her feeling of unrest. "Drink up," she commanded gently. She did. Her eyes met her over the rim of the glass, met and held through the eternity of the drink, and another and another. Excuse me. They were in the car again, driving somewhere. The night was cool, star-laden, and magically beautiful. Irene felt her head was far away like some detached lighter-than-air balloon, soaring high over the city. The dream was frozen at the wheel, a fine, classically sculptured statue, grim, strong, proud. "I wish you'd tell me," Irene murmured. "Where are we going?" "I'll show you. We're almost there." Is it very far from where we were?" "Not too far. Trust me, my darling." "I will, I promise. That's my darling." The motor hummed and sang. The wheels flew soundlessly. The lights of the world collided and pinwheeled off into the darkness. They were slowing down. A full halt now. "What is this place?" "You'll see," he promised. Dimly she let him help her from her seat. They stumbled through the darkness. A ghostly sense of the past swept over Irene. Before her, a spire rose like a gigantic needle in the night. The dream had brought her to the chapel. She felt her heels clicking on the tiled entryway. A deathly hush lay over everything. Up ahead, she made out an almost unearthly glow of light. The dream led her toward this, his hand gently propelling her forward. She was afraid. She shivered in her light evening coat. "Let's go back," she whispered. "We can't." His tone was low, reassuring. They were all waiting. "Please." The faint wheezing drone of an old chapel organ suddenly filled the place. Irene tried to clear her head. Mendelssohn's Wedding March? At this time of night? She giggled, feeling the champagne. "Who's being married?" The dream smiled at her in that tender way of his. "We are," he said simply. A stronger light hit Irene directly across the face. They had walked through the vast double doors. Flickering, bursting candlelight flooded the chapel. It was too astonishing to digest in one second. What had the dream said? Had he said, they were in the center of a vaulted beam-ceiling chapel. Tall stained-glass windows bordered the walls on both sides. Rows of wooden pews lined the room, providing an evenly divided lane leading up to the small raised platform. At days of some kind, to either side of the podium were ranged a line of gilded candelabra, throwing off an amazing illumination. Large upright vases bulged with flowers set the podium off like some Broadway stage. Only this was a chapel, and there was obviously about to be a marriage. The organ was rasping away throatily, building to a stronger, louder pitch. Then Irene saw the people, a man and a woman. Both were facing the tiny platform, their backs to Irene and the dream. There was another figure up on the platform, the minister, dark suit, clerical collar, consulting an open book resting in the podium before him. Lastly, a woman was seated at the old pump organ, to the left of the platform, her busy fingers drawing forth the wheezing version of the wedding march. The music rose loudly, striking the ear with a peculiar chamber effect as though coming from some faraway place. Irene looked at the dream in confusion. Why was he smiling? Why was he so calm in a place of this absurdity? "What is this place?" she demanded. "A chapel. And these people? Every wedding must have witnesses, darling." The information was somehow unsettling. "But we can't get married." He laughed. "Of course I can. You and I can do anything we like." She tried to draw back, but she moved with a flourish, and she stopped. A golden band flashed in his strong fingers. She was smiling. He was smiling again, his face holding all the love in the world. "You see, I even have your wedding ring." He did. The glow of it filled her eyes. Wonderingly, she drew closer to him. She was stunned, speechless. Reality and cold logic could have no part in this. "Come," the dream said, taking her hand. She followed him, then walked arm in arm with him up to the platform. They moved with a slow, measured tread, as if he had rehearsed it yesterday, as if he had rehearsed it at all. The organ bloomed loudly, closing in the final bars of the wedding march. The dream held her hand tightly, as if afraid he might run away. She remained at his side, staring up at the solemn minister poised before them. The glow of the tall candelabra suffused his features with a heavenly light. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to unite this man and this woman in the bonds of holy matrimony." The high walls caused an echo chamber effect that made the words bound off the vaulted ceiling above, caroming the words about like so many flung stones. "This is the solemn moment, a moment in which two lives can become one." The dream squeezed her fingers. "There's nothing more precious, my friends, nothing more precious than life." Aline, lost in the magic of the moment, let her eyes travel to the dream's face to that of the minister. It wasn't the lights, but something was wrong. The clerical collar, the black suit, the man's face stiff and waxen, unreal, like a wax dummy. Confused, she looked back to the dream to see if he had noticed the defect too. "We must all cherish this gift," the minister kept on intoning sonorously, yet with that cold echo, "of life. Cherish and enjoy it." The dream's face was placid and happy. Bewildered now, Irene stole a glance at the two witnesses, the woman first. She blanched. The same garishly painted waxen face stared back at her, a dummy face, a cruel mocking of the living. "Do you have the ring?" the minister said. "Yes," the dream responded. Irene felt herself getting faint. The waxen faces seemed to stare at her sightlessly. "The witnesses are assembled. They come forward, wax-faced on stiff bodies. The candelabra revealed their lifelessness in all its painted horror. "Do you," the minister called, "take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife?" "I do," the dream said. Irene pulled at his arm. What was the matter with him? Was he blind? Couldn't he see this was all a terrible joke? "Do you, Irene Trent, take this man to be your lawful wedded husband?" She couldn't answer. Her tongue had stalled. Her brain had receded in the fear of the unknown. Her icy fingers scarcely sensed the slipping of the gold band over her third finger, left hand. The dream's hand was warm and vital. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister proclaimed with startling finality. She stared down at her finger. The thing was done. The organ was booming again. A new song, a deep rumbling chord of sound which rose and rose on a tremendous pitch of melody. Irene flung a frightened glance at the organist. She saw only a window dummy, hands moving over the keys, a waxen female face, with a crack in one cheek like a damaged doll, and the eyes were glassy and bulging, and now suddenly, shockingly, the dummy was beginning to fall, a sideways topple which crashed it to the floor. Yet the organ continued to reverberate and roar with the frenetic crescendo of music. Irene screamed, feeling the dream slip away from her side. She screamed once, twice, 3 times, and realized that she was standing in a deserted room. Everyone had fled, run away from the terror of the wax faces and the wax people. The double doors yawned open before her, showing the pitch blackness of the night beyond. She hurried headlong for the doors, and the safety to which had to be there someplace, away from terrible nightmare of unreality. The flickering flames of the candelabra guided her, though they seemed to flare fitfully as she went. Before she could reach the doors, they slammed shut. Desperately, she hurled herself at them, raking the panels of her fingernails, tugging the twin handles. Let me out, she gasped, her strength waning. The door swept away from her, opening wide. Out of the darkness loomed a man. Howard Trent. He came loping toward her, the white cane stabbing the ground she could not see. His horrible burned face bobbed before her like a fright mask. His free hand uplifted, A black glove clawed toward her, reaching for her face. Good God, the dream! Where had the dream gone? She fell back, Howard filling the world before her. A scream strove for sound in her throat. The nightmare engulfed her. Excuse me. No, no! Wake up, wake up! Irene's eyes flew open, her face contorted with agony. The room was dark, and the moonlight washed gently at the windows of her room. The familiar objects of the tiny room at the rear of the beauty shop, though enveloped in gloom, brought her jarringly awake. A great wave of relief surged through her aching body. She prodded at her eyes with cold fingers. Darling! She blinked. The dream was standing at the front of the bed, a black window in silhouette. Hello, darling. She stared in awe as she moved to the night table and picked up the clock squatting there. Better hurry. It's past 9. She shook herself and stared down to her hand where the dream had put the ring. She rubbed her fingers despairingly. There was no ring there now. She saw the luminous face of the clock. 9:20. The dream was putting the cloak back on the table facing her. When I'm with you, time stands still, he was saying. She shook her head violently, trying to drive the hornets away. He was holding her coat toward her. Here's your coat. She tried to move into a safe world of her own bed. He came to her, that smile on his face. Hurley, darling, remember, this is our night. Her hands went up to cover her eyes, to blot him out, to shut off the sound of his voice. This is our night, darling. She tried to scream. No sound came. Her brain wheeled over, turned another dizzy corner, and the dam burst as she ripped her hands away from her face. I can't wake up, she screamed hysterically. Oh God, I can't wake up. I can't wake up. The dream held the coat out for her, and she dutifully came from the bed, hopelessly locked into the world she should never have entered. No, I barely made it through that one. I wanted to finish this chapter or whatever. Okay, thanks for listening and bearing with the coughs. Ciao.